David, let's start with the first question. What does courageous and ethical action mean to you as a society leader when the aim is gender and racial equity, diversity, and inclusion? And if you can give an example of when you personally took courageous action in engaging your board, your leadership team or members to advance these interests, or when you supported your team in doing so, I think that would be really meaningful for our members.
Well, Jamie, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and I want to congratulate the consortium on what you're doing. It's just terrifically important, and it's an honor and privilege to be here with you today. But I have to take exception to the question, because the real courage and the leadership is happening, every day on the front lines of the struggle for diversity, equity, inclusion, and gender equity. And with all due respect to my colleagues who head up societies or associations or other organizations, we're really there to serve the needs of those who are dealing with the effects of the problems that we're trying to solve. Number one, I've tried very hard over the years and different leadership opportunities I've had to listen to the people who are actually struggling and living through these areas of problems. And then secondly, I think it's important if one has a leadership position and reports to a board, to not worry too much about that difference we sometimes focus on between so-called governance and so-called management. We all have to link arms and recognize that we have problems and decide we're going to do something about it and make sure we understand the extent and the depth of the problem and then move ahead. We have a fabulous board that was willing to tackle this, to speak out and say what needed to be said, really in two areas. One area was to recognize that we had problems and what the problems were and what the extent of the problems and the ramifications and implications of the problems were. That's number one. And without that, without a dispassionate assessment of where we are, no progress can really be made. And then secondly, to begin to chart a course toward diversity, equity, and inclusion, starting really with looking in the mirror and trying to understand each of our inherent biases and each of the hills that we have to climb as individuals. So those were the ways in which we tried to tackle. I hate to use the word I because it was a team effort and still is and really always will be. But it really has to do with understanding by listening to people undergoing the actual experience and then deciding to work together at the board level and the management level to define the situation as it is and then see how we can move forward.
Were there any ways and sort of approaches to communicate with your board that were particularly effective, especially in raising up the voices of those who are struggling and need to be heard so that there could be real understanding as you link arms with your board?
Well, we developed, and when I say we, I mean the board and the leadership of the AAMC. We developed a new strategic plan beginning a few months after I came to the organization. And we decided to do it together, to do the conception and the writing and the argument and eventually the approval together as one combined body, the board and what we call the leadership team. And what we decided to do in that case was first to look at the mission and vision of the organization. We switched two words, doesn't sound like much, but our earlier mission statement was that we would serve and lead academic medicine. We switched serve and lead, so now it says we lead and serve, understanding that someone has to take the first step toward facing these issues, recognizing that we have failed to deal with them adequately, and then moving ahead together. So that was the first thing. I asked that our board, when they do my annual evaluation, in part, base it on the diversity, the composition of the organization, and the climate, the environment, whether it is an environment that is conducive to people feeling safe, to people feeling the possibility of success. And I passed that accountability down to the 15 people who report to me, who run the different major divisions. We call them clusters in the AAMC, the chiefs. Climate is so important. I really can't stress it enough, that if the climate is not conducive to a person feeling safe and the possibility, indeed the probability of success. Not only are they not going to succeed, they're just not going to stay. And so we tried that accountability. It's still an experiment unrolling, and we'll just sort of see how it goes. But that's what we're trying to do.